The air in the clearing was thick with the copper tang of blood and the absolute, suffocating silence of a massacre. 5 elites, men who had spent years tempering their bones and gathering their origin power, had been erased in a heartbeat. This was the brutal reality of the red-scaled dragon snake. The young man stood paralyzed, his skin the color of a fresh shroud. His knees knocked together with a pathetic, rhythmic rattle, and he looked as though he was seconds away from vomiting his own soul. Lu Dong and the others couldn't help it, a jagged, mocking laughter tore from their throats. To see such a pampered brat face the raw, unwashed face of death was the only medicine for their own terror. But the brat's fear instantly curdled into a foul, petulant rage. He pointed a trembling finger at them, his face twisting into a mask of ugly entitlement. You dare to laugh at me? At me? What of it? Lu Dong spat, his hands still white-knuckled on his weapon. My servants are dead, the boy shrieked, his voice cracking. Since they are gone, you will be my dogs. Haul this serpent back to the city for me, now. Lu Dong and the group shared a look of pure bewilderment. Was this fool truly insane? He was standing in a graveyard of his own making, and he was still barking orders at the people who had actually killed the beast. How dare you look at me like that? The boy screamed. I am Feng Luo, third young master of the Feng clan of Dayuan City. My brother is Feng Yan, a true disciple of the Huyan Academy. The laughter died instantly. A cold, heavy dread settled over Lu Dong's group. The Feng clan was a titan. A monster with gushing spring-tier warriors that could crush their entire town like an anthill. And Feng Yan, a true disciple? That meant he was one of the top 30 geniuses in the entire country. A future spiritual ocean-tier powerhouse. To cross him was to invite a slow, agonizing extinction. Is this Feng Yan actually a threat? Ling Han asked, his voice disturbingly casual. He is a nightmare, Lu Yutong whispered, her face tight with a solemnity that hadn't been there during the fight with the snake. He broke into the gushing spring tier at 20. Now he's at the peak of the 3rd layer. He has formed saber chi. At least 3 flashes. He is on a path to become a royal existence of the Rain Country. The others shivered. A man who could advance 3 layers in 3 years was a freak of nature. By the time he was 60, he would be a spiritual pedestal tier overseer, a god among men. Oh, Ling Han replied. It was the most dismissive sound they had ever heard. He patted Lu Yutong's shoulder with a sharp, encouraging thud. Don't worry. I guarantee you'll be stronger than him. Much stronger. Lu Yutong nodded, her eyes flashing. She didn't doubt him. She was practicing a heaven-grade technique given to her by an Alchemy Emperor. Feng Yan was a big fish in a small, stagnant pond. She was being trained to swim in the ocean. Did you hear me? Feng Luo barked, emboldened by their silence. Pick up my snake, move. Ling Han shook his head, a dark, dangerous light igniting in his eyes. I despise people like you. You hide behind the shadows of your betters because you are nothing but a hollow shell. He began to walk toward Feng Luo. Ling Han, don't, Lu Dong cried out, terror flaring. If you kill him, the Feng clan will hunt us to the ends of the earth. Relax, Ling Han said, a brutal smile spreading across his face. I'm not going to kill him. I'm just going to give him the thrashing his parents clearly forgot. You dare? Feng Luo scrambled backward, tripping over his own boots. He was a 9th-layer body refining practitioner, but his power was a lie, built on pills and soft living. Ling Han didn't waste words. He lunged. Wham! His boot connected with Feng Luo's gut, sending the boy flying. Ling Han followed him down, raining a storm of kicks and strikes. This is for the arrogance, crack. This is for the greed, thud. Feng Luo didn't even try to fight back. He howled like a wounded animal, his nose exploding in a spray of red, his face swelling into a purple, unrecognizable mess. When Ling Han finally stepped back, the 3rd young master didn't stay to argue. He scrambled up and fled into the woods, sobbing and trailing blood behind him like a beaten cur. Ling Han turned back to the massive carcass. He plunged his blade into the snake's chest and carved out the inner core. It was the size of a fist, glowing with a malevolent, fiery crimson light. The others tried to touch it, but the moment their skin met the core, they recoiled with gasps of pain. It felt like touching a live wire, a raw, spiritual rejection. Only Li Hao managed to hold on for a second before his hand jerked away. It has the blood of dragons, Ling Han explained, holding the pulsing orb with total ease. It suppresses the weak. Unless you have qi, you aren't even worthy to hold its heart. He tossed the core into a pouch and pointed to the massive, broken length of the snake. The backbone is dragon bone. Strip the spinal cord. It will temper your bodies until they are like iron. Consider it your payment for the trouble. As Lu Dong and the others set to work with frantic, greedy energy, Ling Han turned to the cave. He still had a promise to keep to himself. He and Lu Yu Tong ventured back into the dark, passing through the narrow, reeking vein of the mountain. The stench of blood was thick enough to taste, but then, the passage opened. In the center of a vast, silent cavern, a single plant grew from the cold stone. It had no leaves, no branches. Just a single, twisting stem that spiraled upward like a serpent trying to taste the stars. The earth dragon grass. Ling Han reached out, his fingers trembling slightly. With this, his path to the next tier was no longer a walk, it was a flight. Ling Han's heart hammered against his ribs, a wild, jagged rhythm of triumph. The stalk of earth dragon grass in his hand was over 200 years old, a gnarled, pulsing miracle of nature. It wasn't just an ingredient. It was the key to his father's salvation. Every year of its age was a year of life returned to Ling Dongsheng. Congratulations, Lu Yu Tong whispered, her voice softened by a rare, genuine warmth. You're one step closer to healing your father. Ling Han didn't answer with words, he couldn't. His face was a mask of raw joy, a flicker of humanity in the brutal grind of his path. He carefully packed the grass away, his mind already churning. 1 year. 2 at most. I will restore his pride. They emerged from the reeking darkness of the cave to a scene of frantic labor. Lu Dong and his group were already hovering over a bubbling cauldron, the massive ribs of the red-scaled dragon snake poking out like the ruins of a ship. But when Ling Han produced a miniature alchemy furnace from his pack, their world stopped spinning. No way, Lu Dong stammered, his eyes bulging. He's an alchemist too? He's a monster, Li Hao growled, shaking his head until his neck cracked. Inhuman cultivation speed, 4 flashes of sword chi, and now he's refined enough to brew pills? I'm done. I am never comparing myself to this freak again. It's bad for my health. Ling Han ignored them. His hands became a blur, a frantic dance of precision and heat. His 5 elements origin nuclei roared, providing a level of thermal control that made the process look like child's play. In 1 hour, one single, impossible hour, the lid hissed open. 13 transcending origin pills lay in the basin, glowing with a soft, lethal promise. Take them, Ling Han said, his voice dropping into a commander's tone. He kept 8 for his complex, hungry nuclei and handed the rest to the group. They didn't argue. They knew they had barely earned a crumb of this feast. The clearing became a silent temple of evolution. Ling Han sat amidst the brush, the pill dissolving on his tongue like a drop of liquid sun. Wang! The spiritual qi of the mountain didn't just flow toward him, it was dragged in. His 5 elements mixed chaos lotus spun like a cyclone, devouring the energy. Within his dantian, the second origin nucleus began to scream into existence. 5 pinpricks of light ignited, rotating faster and faster, expanding the space of his dantian with a bone-grinding pressure. He needed a god's storehouse to fuel his power. The spatial pill from the tournament was no longer a luxury, it was a necessity for survival. The advancement was hair-raising. Second layer. Early, middle, late, peak. Ling Han opened his eyes and they burned with a terrifying, golden light. A day and a night had vanished. He was starving. A primal, hollow hunger that felt like it would eat him from the inside out. Lu Dong and the others were waking too. Li Hao had breached the second layer, his aura sharper, more predatory. Ling Han looked at the boy and saw a future Saber King, a weapon he would forge with his own hands. The soup is ready. Someone cried. The golden broth of the dragon snake's marrow produced an aroma so thick it was almost intoxicating. They fell upon the pot like starving wolves, tearing at the grilled serpent flesh and gulping down the liquid gold. It was too much. Their bodies bloated, their skin turning a feverish red as the sheer volume of nutrition threatened to burst their veins. Sit. Digest. Ling Han commanded. He sat cross-legged, circulating the indestructible heaven scroll. While the others would waste half of this nutrition through sweat and breath, Ling Han's body became a vacuum. A faint, golden glow began to pulse from his skin. The sign of a body being tempered into something beyond human. Yes, he thought, his teeth gritted against the heat. I can feel it. The dead tree tier is within my reach. My skin will be iron, my bones will be stone. He was no longer just a martial artist. He was becoming a living weapon, carved from the marrow of kings. Another day of absolute, bone-grinding silence passed. Ling Han snapped his eyes open, a predatory, satisfied curl touching his lips. Without a word, he drew his sword, a cold, silver sliver of death, and brought the edge down in a savage, whistling slash against his own extended left hand. To any observer, it was an act of madness, a sudden lapse into self-mutilation. But as the steel bit into the skin, there was no spray of crimson, no scream of agony. The blade simply stopped. When he pulled the sword away, there was nothing but a faint, mocking white line across his palm. The defense. It's holding, Ling Han whispered, his voice a low rasp. He hadn't used a drop of origin power to shield himself. This was raw, biological defiance. He adjusted his grip, narrowed his eyes, and began to circulate the indestructible heaven scroll. He lashed out again, this time with enough force to cleave a man's arm from his torso. The blade finally tore the skin. A jagged gash opened. But then, the nightmare truly began. Not a single drop of blood escaped the wound. Ha ha. The first layer. The body of dead tree. Ling Han's laughter was dark and jagged. His flesh was no longer just meat and bone. It was like the ancient, desiccated timber of a 1,000-year-old oak. It didn't bleed. It didn't lose its essence. And as he watched, the wound began to knit itself back together with a visible, terrifying speed, vanishing until the skin was as smooth as polished jade. And this is just the beginning, he thought, a feverish light in his eyes. If dead tree is this potent, what happens when I reach rock cliff? When I reach iron sheet? When I finally achieve diamond tier and can regrow a severed limb in the blink of an eye? He felt a surge of invincible arrogance. In this world, the four winds race were born with godlike speed. The sword-armed race were living blades. The wild thunder race were walking storms. They were born with the special constitutions that made them masters of the world. But Ling Han, he was building his own godhood. He was breaking the laws of nature, piece by bloody piece. In this life, I am the one who shatters the void, he growled. I am the one who becomes a god. He looked over at Lu Dong and the others. They were finally emerging from their meditative trance. They weren't cultivators of the scroll. They couldn't absorb the dragon snake's marrow with his terrifying efficiency. They had wasted much, yet even they stood up with a new, heavy power in their limbs. Big brother Ling. It's time, Lu Dong said, his voice somber. 10 days until the new year. We have to return to the city. Until Dayuan City, then, Ling Han replied. He watched them leave, noting the hesitant look in Chen Pengju's eyes. He didn't care. He turned to Lu Yutong, whose icy beauty seemed more lethal than ever. My defense. It's on a different level now, she said, her voice trembling with excitement. If I face Cheng Wen-kun again, he won't last 10 moves. I'll butcher him. Ling Han nodded. He consumed his second transcending origin pill, feeling the raw energy propel him to the peak of the third layer of element gathering tier. He reached the limit of what the pill could do. Beyond this lay the revolving origin pill, a medicine so expensive it required the hearts of gushing spring kings. Let's go home, Ling Han said. They rode like the wind, stopping only when the horses threatened to collapse. During the quiet nights, Ling Han focused his soul, condensing a single drop of indestructible true fluid. It was only the size of a grain of rice, a fraction of its true potential, but it was his ultimate insurance policy, a drop of life to defy death. 7 days later, the gates of Great Cloud Town appeared through the winter mist. Ling Han had already broken through the fourth layer of element gathering tier. The town was a riot of red lanterns and celebratory banners, but the Ling clan residents felt different. With the traitor Ling Zhongquan dead and rotting, the clan was finally breathing. Young Master Han. The servants called out, their voices thick with a newfound, terrified respect. They saw the change in him. He wasn't just a boy anymore, he was the iron spine of the family. Hanner. Ling Dongxing met him at the door, his relief visible in every line of his face. Then, he froze. He sensed the aura radiating off his son. Your cultivation, it's fourth layer, father, Ling Han said, a genuine smile finally breaking his brutal facade. Ling Dongxing didn't gasp. He didn't shout. He simply closed his eyes and smiled, a father's pride washing over him. His son was a freak. A monster. And thank the gods, he was his monster. But as the town prepared for the new year, Ling Han did not rest. He brewed spirit-gathering pills and watched Lu Yutong manifest yet another flash of sword chi in the training courtyard. The Dayuan tournament was coming. The Feng clan was waiting, and Ling Han was ready to show them what happens when a dead tree refuses to fall. Ling Han watched Lu Yutong train, his eyes cold and calculating. The air in the courtyard cracked as she unleashed a second flash of sword chi. Most would call her a prodigy, a young ruler of the rain country, but to Ling Han, this was merely the baseline. The third flash would be a wall of fire she wasn't ready to climb. Not yet. In this backwater country, they handed out titles of ruler like cheap candy to anyone who could make their blade hum. Then came the new year, the season of rebirth, but for the Ling clan, it felt like the first time they were truly breathing without a noose around their necks. The branch families crawled back to the main residence, most of them soft, mundane people with no spark of the divine in their blood. Among them was Ling Zizan, 8 years old, Earth-grade spirit base. She followed Ling Han like a shadow, her eyes wide with the innocent belief that the world was kind. Big brother Han, Da Shang called me ugly. Beat him up, she wailed, clutching at his robes. Ling Han picked her up, his laughter short and dry. We save our fists for the monsters outside these walls. Zan Zan. Da Shang is just a boy blinded by jealousy. He looked at the child and saw a flickering flame he refused to let go out. He wouldn't leave her here to rot in Grey Cloud Academy. He would drag her to the Imperial City, to Hu Yang Academy, and force the world to acknowledge her. He wasn't a babysitter, but he was building a legacy of iron. Big brother Han, the girl whispered, tilting her head. When are you and big sister Yu Tong getting married? The icy beauty, standing nearby, turned a shade of crimson that rivaled the New Year lanterns and vanished into the shadows. Ling Han grinned, a rare flash of genuine amusement breaking his brutal focus. You've scared off my wife, little one. How will you pay me back? I'll find you a prettier one, she chirped, oblivious to the weight of the world. But the laughter died as the festival ended. It was time for the Da Yuan tournament. The journey to Da Yuan City was 800 miles of dust and determination. When the city finally loomed over the horizon, it wasn't a town. It was a titan. Walls 100 meters high, a stone beast crouching in the dirt, home to the Da Yuan king, a master of the spiritual ocean tier. They paid their silver and stepped into the crushing press of the city. Ling Dongxing and Lu Yu Tong watched Ling Han, expecting him to be awestruck by the towering spires and the roar of the crowds. Ling Han didn't even blink. He had seen empires rise and fall. He had walked through golden palaces that made this city look like a mud hut. His calm was unnerving, a predatory stillness that made people clear a path without knowing why. They searched for hours, but the city was bloated with travelers. Every inn was a fortress of no vacancy. Grandmaster Ling. A voice cut through the din. Zhu Yixin, the white-haired alchemist, hurried toward them, bowing so low his forehead nearly touched the cobblestones. The fear on the old man's face was palpable. He looked like a dog that had missed its master's call. Grandmaster, forgive me, I was visiting an old friend. I should have been at your side for the new year. Stand up, Zhu Yixin, Ling Han said, his voice flat, and stop calling me Grandmaster. Call me Ling Han. The old man's eyes nearly popped out. I couldn't, it's a disgrace to the teachings. Ling Han's face turned into a mask of stone. I am going into a tournament to break the bones of geniuses. If you keep announcing my rank to the world, no one will dare to bleed for me. Call me Ling Han, or I'll find a student who can follow a simple order. Zhu Yixin shivered, the weight of Ling Han's intent pinning him to the spot. The Grandmaster was gone. Standing before him was a 17-year-old boy with the eyes of an ancient executioner. Zhu Yixin's throat tightened, his heart hammering against his ribs as he looked at Ling Han's impenetrable, stony expression. He knew he was looking at an emperor of the craft, regardless of the youth's smooth skin. I shall obey, he stammered, his voice thick with a forced humility. I shall call you young friend Ling. Even the term, young friend, felt like a blasphemy on his tongue, but he dared not ignite Ling Han's ire. Tell me, Zhu Yixin continued, his eyes darting toward the massive, obsidian-black spires of the city's heart, are you here for the slaughter? For the tournament? Ling Han gave a short, brutal nod. We have no place to rest. The city is choking on its own guests. Then come to the Heaven's Medicine Pavilion. Zhu Yixin's voice rose with a desperate edge of hope. Stay in my quarters. It is a fortress, far from the filth of the common inns. Ling Han looked at the weary faces of his father and Lu Yu Tong. Lead the way. They didn't walk to a mere shop. The Da Yuan branch of the pavilion was a sprawling, stone palace, guarded by men whose eyes were as cold as the steel at their hips. 100 alchemists toiled within its bowels, their fires burning day and night to fuel the country's greed for power and healing. Once the rooms were secured, Zhu Yixin approached Ling Han in the private courtyard, his hands trembling. Young friend. I have a request. A debt of knowledge that only you can pay. Ling Han leaned against a marble pillar, his eyes tracing the orange glow of the sunset. An alchemy problem, speak. It is an old friend, Zhu Yixin said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. He has unearthed a fragment of the reverse pill formula. But the scroll is rotted. The key ingredients are lost to time. He is failing, and many lives hang in the balance of that failure. Reverse pill. Ling Han's lip curled in a silent, bitter sneer. A common medicinal formula. Lost? Had the world truly fallen so far into ignorance while he slept in the void? Take me to him, Ling Han commanded. They crossed into a secluded palace courtyard where the air smelled of bitter herbs and expensive tea. 3 figures sat within. 2 old men with the arrogant posture of masters, and a young girl with eyes that sparkled with a dangerous, predatory intelligence. Zhang Wei Shan, the branch master, didn't even look at Ling Han. He was too busy fawning over the other man. Old Man Zhu. Meet Guanmu Chong Feng. The man whose sweeping cloud sword is a legend in Rain Country. With the 3 of us, we shall crack this reverse pill within 3 months. Zhu Yixin tried to speak, but Zhang Wei Shan cut him off, his voice booming with self-importance. They saw Ling Han as a mere servant, a ghost in the background. The young girl, however, didn't miss him. She circled Ling Han like a wolf evaluating a stray pup. She was delicate, but her smile was a jagged blade. Are you Zhu's new dog? She asked, her voice dripping with mock sweetness. No, Ling Han said, his voice flat and cold. Ah, a failure then, you haven't passed the test. She slapped his shoulder with a heavy, patronizing thud. Listen well, boy. I am Qizan Tai, 7th princess of Da Yuan. I am Zhang's true disciple, which makes me your elder sister. If anyone tries to break your bones in this city, you tell them my name. Understood? Ling Han almost laughed. A princess playing at alchemy, and why would I do that? Because I'm the only thing standing between you and the gutter, she snapped, her eyes narrowing. Zhu Yixin had finally had enough. He stepped forward, his voice cutting through the old men's chatter like a thunderclap. My friends, let me introduce the man who actually saved the wind and fire pill. The man whose guidance is the only reason I stand here as a black-grade master. He gestured toward Ling Han, his voice trembling with raw reverence. This is Ling Han. Without him, your reverse pill is nothing but a scrap of useless paper. The silence that followed was brutal. Zhang Wei Shan froze, his tea cooling in his hand. Guanmu Chong Feng's hand twitched toward his hilt, his eyes narrowing as he re-evaluated the servant. Qizan Tai's jaw dropped. She looked at Ling Han, then at her master, her face turning a vivid, humiliated red. She had just tried to protect a man who could likely rewrite her entire life's work in his sleep. Old Man Zhu. Zhang Wei Shan whispered, his voice cracking. You cannot be serious, this boy? I have never been more serious in my life, Zhu Yixin growled. Ling Han stepped into the center of the circle, his aura expanding until the air itself felt heavy, suffocating the arrogance of the masters. He looked at the fragmented scroll on the table. 3 months. Ling Han's voice was a low, terrifying growl. I'll give you the completed formula in 3 minutes. But understand this. Once I pick up that pen, the hierarchy in this room dies. Do you want the pill, or do you want your pride? 17, 18? The age hit the room like a physical blow. In the brutal world of alchemy, experience was bought with 1,000 failed furnaces and a mountain of wasted herbs. You didn't just become a master. You bled for it over decades. But this boy. His eyes held a cold, ancient depth that defied the smooth skin of his face. So, Zhang Wei Shan said, his voice forced into a jagged, polite edge, which of the great alchemist houses calls you heir? Who is your father, boy? I am self-taught, Ling Han replied. The words were a slap to the face of every master in the room. Self-taught? In an era where every secret was guarded with blood and steel? Guanmu Chong Feng let out a sharp, mocking snort. To him, the idea was a pathetic joke. You didn't ponder your way into a pill formula. You inherited it through generations of sweat and silence. Old Man Zhang, Zhu Yixin urged, his voice trembling with a raw, desperate energy. Take out the scroll. Show him the reverse pill. I promise you, what happens next will shatter your mind. Zhang Wei Shan hesitated. That scroll was his life's blood. He had sacrificed fortunes to drag that rotted fragment from the dust. It was a secret, and secrets were more valuable than gold. Brother Zhang, don't be a fool, Guanmu Chong Feng snapped. You're going to show a sacred formula to this brat? Who does he think he is? Zhu Yixin's face turned a violent, bruised purple. You doubt him? You doubt me? His chest heaved with a savage fury. He looked at his oldest friend, Zhang Wei Shan, and saw the flicker of uncertainty. It was the ultimate betrayal. Fine, Zhu Yixin roared, the sound echoing off the stone walls. If you don't trust my word, Zhang Wei Shan, then our friendship is dead. From this breath onward, we are strangers. Old man Zhu. Zhang turned pale. To break a 40-year bond over a teenager? The gravity of it crushed the room. Don't be rash. I'll take it out. I'm taking it out now. Don't force yourself, Zhu Yixin hissed, his voice dripping with venomous disappointment. He turned to Ling Han, bowing his head in shame. Young friend Ling. I am so sorry. I should never have brought you to see these blind fools. Ling Han didn't look at Zhu. He turned his gaze toward Duanmu Changfeng, his eyes as cold as a winter grave. You think your little fragment of a formula is important? Ling Han's voice was a low, lethal rumble. You think I crave your rotted secrets? Listen closely, master. Violet smoked leaf. Thousand blossom fruit. Windless grass. Ling Han didn't stop. He rattled off 10, 12, 15 ingredients in a single, breathless recitation. Duanmu Changfeng looked confused, but Zhang Wei Shan. Zhang's world was ending. His hands began to shake so violently the tea spilled over his knuckles. His breath hitched in a ragged, terrified gasp. He knew those names. They were the exact ingredients on his secret scroll. But Ling Han didn't stop where the scroll ended. He named 3 more. 3 ingredients that bridged the gaps, that solved the puzzle, that turned a broken recipe into a masterpiece. Ling Han had the complete formula. He had it all along. Zhang Wei Shan's pride collapsed like a house of cards. He doubled over, bowing so deeply his forehead nearly touched the dirt at Ling Han's feet. Forgive me, he choked out. Young friend. Please, forgive my pathetic ignorance. Ling Han remained unmoved, a statue of stone amidst their panic. This is a trick, Duanmu Changfeng screamed, his face ashen. He's bluffing, he's playing you both for fools. Zhang Wei Shan stood up, his face a mask of icy resolve. Duanmu Changfeng, get out. What? Duanmu recoiled as if he'd been struck. Everything you gave me, I will return. But you are no longer welcome in this house, Zhang said, his voice flat and final. I almost lost the chance to stand before a true Grand Master because of your arrogance. Leave, now. Duanmu Changfeng stood frozen, his eyes burning with a murderous, humiliated light. He was a gushing spring-tier warrior, a master of the sword and the flame, and he was being thrown out like a common beggar for a boy. He swept his sleeves back, his gaze lingering on Ling Han with a cold, jagged promise of violence. He blamed Ling Han. He would see him bleed for this. As the door slammed shut, the 2 old masters turned back to Ling Han, their heads bowed low. Even the princess, Qi Zan Tai, stood in the corner, her jaw hanging open, her elder sister, bravado crushed into dust. My friends, Ling Han said, his voice cutting through the heavy silence like a blade. Pick up the pen. We have work to do, and I don't have all year to wait for you to catch up. Ling Han didn't waste another second. He strode to the study table, the scratching of his pen against the paper the only sound in the suffocating silence of the room. His movements were a blur of predatory precision. He wasn't just writing, he was resurrecting a corpse. He finished and thrust the paper at Zhang Wei Shan. He did it for Zhu Yixin. The old man had been a loyal dog, providing the lead on the Earth Dragon grass, and Ling Han paid his debts in full. Zhang Wei Shan's eyes tore across the page. His breath hitched. His heart hammered against his ribs like a trapped animal. It was all there. Every ingredient, every precise quantity, and the 3 lost components that had baffled the world's greatest alchemists for centuries. The reverse pill, a legend, a ghost of the past, was sitting in his trembling hands. He looked at the boy and felt a wave of searing humiliation. He had tried to hide a broken scrap of paper from a god. His face burned a violent, shamed red. Old man Zhang, Zhu Yixin huffed, his voice thick with lingering spite. Are you satisfied now? Hee hee. Zhang could only let out a hollow, embarrassed laugh, clutching the paper as if it were the beating heart of a king. Ling Han didn't wait for their worship. I'm leaving, he said, turning on his heel. He stepped out into the bustling veins of Dayuan City, the cold air a welcome relief from the cloying scent of herbs. Hey, you ungrateful brat, Qi Zan Tai, the 7th princess, came charging after him, her face a mask of faux outrage. You made me look like a fool. I told you I'd be your elder sister and protect you, and then you go and make Duanmu Changfeng look like a peasant. Ling Han offered a thin, dangerous smile. I never asked for your protection, princess. I don't care, you owe me, she snapped, though her eyes danced with a crafty, political light. Listen, since you're here for the tournament, you need to know who's coming to kill you. My 4th brother, Qi Yongyi. The king of eternal night. He's the apex. He's taking first place, no questions asked. She began rattling off the list of the damned. Li Dong Yu of the Stone Wolf sect. A ninth-layer monster with the little Tianyuan hands. Jin Wuji. A freak who could manifest 2 flashes of palm chi. Sha Zhang Guang. An 18-year-old animal from Fuyang Town. Bai Li Teng Yun. The sect master's son who fought like a demon despite being only at the 7th layer. They're all predators, she warned, her voice dropping, and my brother is hosting a feast tomorrow night. Only the top 50 prospects are invited. You're coming. Ling Han saw the trap instantly. Your brother is hunting for supporters. He wants an alchemist in his pocket to fuel his climb to the throne. You're too smart for your own good, the princess whispered, a sharp, ambitious glint in her eyes. My eldest brother has the Lu clan's blood in his veins and 10 years of support. If my 4th brother wants the crown, he needs a miracle, he needs you. Ling Han dismissed her words as easily as smoke. The squabbles of princes meant nothing to him, but he would go. He wanted to see if this king of eternal night lived up to the blood on his name. The next morning, the sun rose over a city choked with ambition. Ling Han and his father stood in the registration line, a serpentine queue that stretched for miles. This wasn't just a game. It was the gate to the Huyang Academy. To fail here was to be forgotten. Ling Han waited with a cold, terrifying patience. He had discarded his past divinity. He was a grain of sand again, building himself into a mountain. 2 hours passed. He was 1 person away from the desk. Then, the air shifted. A young man, draped in silks and flanked by 4 slab-muscled enforcers in black, shoved through the crowd. They didn't just walk. They trampled. They shoulder-checked a woman aside and cut directly in front of Ling Han at the head of the line. Back of the queue, Ling Han said. His voice wasn't a shout. It was a low, vibrating growl that made the air around him feel heavy and jagged. Now. The young man stopped. He turned slowly, a look of genuine, amused disbelief on his face. He looked at Ling Han's plain robes and laughed. A high, mocking sound that set the teeth on edge. You want me to queue? He asked, his eyes wide with a cruel mirth. Do you have any idea who I am, you pathetic piece of filth? I don't care who you are. Ling Han's voice cut through the air like a winter wind, brittle and freezing. Get to the back of the line, now. Jin Wusheng's laughter was a jagged, ugly sound. He looked at Ling Han as if he were a speck of dirt on an emperor's boot. You don't know me? I am Jin Wusheng, my brother is Jin Wuji? The crowd drew a collective, terrified breath. Jin Wuji, the monster of the Jin clan, one of the favorites to drown the tournament in blood. To insult the brother was to invite the wrath of the elder. I don't care if you're Jin Wusheng or Jin Wuji, Ling Han said, his eyes darkening with an ancient, weary impatience. Get lost. He didn't wait for a reply. Ling Han's hand shot out like a viper, gripping Jin Wusheng's shoulder with a strength that felt like crushing iron. With a casual flick of his wrist, Shua, the arrogant brat, was sent hurtling through the air. Pung! Jin Wusheng slammed into the stone wall, his silks tearing as he slid down in a heap of groans and shattered pride. Young master, his enforcers shrieked, scrambling to pull him from the dirt. Ling Han didn't even turn his head. He looked at the registration official, an old man who looked ordinary but smelled of the gushing spring tear. Ling Han's gaze sharpened. He respected the power, even if he no longer feared it. Bastard, Jin Wusheng roared, shoving his guards aside, his face a purple mask of fury. You dare lay hands on me and then act as if I am nothing? I will tear the skin from your. Quiet, the old official snapped. The air in the room suddenly grew heavy, pressing down on everyone's lungs. Old man, stay out of this. Jin Wusheng screamed, blinded by his own pathetic ego. Ling Han shook his head. The boy was walking into a meat grinder. The Jin clan grows weaker with every breath, the old man sighed, a sound of profound disappointment. He flicked his fingers. A movement so small it was almost invisible. Pung! An invisible shockwave of Herculean force slammed into Jin Wusheng, ejecting him and his 4 dogs from the room as if they were trash being swept out of a temple. The silence that followed was absolute. The chief butler of the royal house. Someone whispered. The name ripples through the crowd like a cold current. This was no clerk. This was the right hand of the Dayuan king. Jin Wusheng didn't come back. Even a fool knows when they've barked at a god. Ling Han stepped forward, clasping his hands. Many thanks for your justice, senior. The chief butler squinted at Ling Han, a strange, predatory smile playing on his lips. To reach the element gathering tier at your age. Promising. My 7th young mistress is about your age. Perhaps a match is in order? The crowd nearly choked. Was the royal house scouting for a prince consort in the registration line? Ling Han thought of the 7th young mistress, the crafty, chattering cheese on tie, and felt a headache forming. Many thanks, senior, but let's finish the paperwork first. The butler laughed, unfazed by the rejection. Name, origin, age, cultivation. Ling Han. Grey Cloud Town, 17, 4th layer of element gathering tier. Pooh. The sound of several people gagging on their own breath filled the room. Eyeballs threatened to pop from sockets. 17 years old and in the 4th layer? Even the 4th prince, the king of eternal night, with all the elixirs of a kingdom at his disposal, had barely touched that height at 17. Ling Han wasn't a genius, he was a freak, a nightmare in human skin. The butler handed him a jade plaque, his eyes twinkling with a dangerous interest. He kept Ling Han there, chatting about trivialities as if they were old friends, ignoring the growing, restless queue. When Ling Han finally took his leave, the butler called out, "Visit the royal house, boy. My doors are open to you." The crowd watched Ling Han walk away, their eyes burning with a mix of envy and terror. He had the favor of the king's butler and the power of a monster. He wasn't just a participant anymore. He was the target everyone had to kill, or the storm they had to survive. Night fell like a bruised shroud over Da Yuan City. The residence of the 4th prince stood as a defiant monument of stone and silk, just a single street away from the king's royal house. In this city, blood was cheap, but power was everything. The 1st prince, the rightful heir, was a cornered wolf, watching as his younger brother, the king of eternal night, carved a path toward the throne. Every guest arriving tonight was a pawn in a game of regicide and resurrection. Ling Han and Lu Yu Tong arrived on foot. No gilded carriage, no thunder of hooves. Just a warrior and his shadow. "Halt! Show your invitation." A guard stepped forward, his spear a cold line of silver in the torchlight. "Invitation?" Ling Han's voice was flat. "I am Ling Han. I was told I was on the list." "No invitation, no entry," the guard barked, his eyes hard and unyielding. Ling Han's jaw tightened. That brat, cheese on tie. She had set him up. She wanted him to crawl, or she wanted him to bleed. Ha 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 ha. Look at this. A village dog trying to bark at a palace gate. The voice was like a jagged shard of glass. Jin Wushang stepped down from a luxurious carriage, his robes shimmering with sickening excess. He flourished a gold-stamped invitation, waving it in Ling Han's face like a holy relic. "Look closely, peasant. This is an invitation. A piece of filth like you wouldn't see one in 10 lifetimes." Jin Wushang's face twisted into a mask of pure, ecstatic malice. This was his moment. This was the vengeance he had craved since the humiliation at the registration office. "Go back to your hovel before I have these guards break your legs." Ling Han didn't move. He looked at the boy, a 9th-layer body-refining weakling, and felt a wave of cold, weary disgust. "What are you waiting for? Do you think if you stand there long enough, someone will?" Jin Wushang's voice trailed off as his eyes landed on Lu Yu Tong. His breath hitched. His pupils dilated with a sudden, filthy hunger. "Brat. You. This woman, she." Pung. The sound of the blow was sickening, a wet, heavy thud of knuckles meeting bone. Jin Wushang didn't even see the movement. He was launched backward, his flashy formal wear fluttering as he crashed into the dirt like a broken toy. Ling Han stood with his fist still clenched, his aura radiating a low, lethal hum. He didn't want the boy's filth to even touch the air near Lu Yu Tong. "You hit me. Again?" Jin Wushang scrambled up, clutching his shattered face, tears of rage and pain streaming down his cheeks. "I am the 6th young master of the Jin clan. You're a dead man." He turned to the guards, shrieking like a wounded animal. "Are you blind? He attacked a guest of the prince. Arrest him? Kill him?" The guards hesitated, their hands moving to their hilts. "Master Ling," one said, stepping forward with a grim resolve, "you must surrender." "Is there a problem here?" A young girl stepped out from the residence, her courtly robes flowing behind her. Cheese on tie. She had a look of mock surprise on her face that didn't reach her crafty, intelligent eyes. "Greetings, 7th princess." The guards dropped into a chorus of salutes. "Rise," she said, her voice dripping with an artificial maturity. She looked at Ling Han and stifled a giggle. "Yi? Why are you still outside? I thought you'd be halfway through the wine by now." Ling Han gave her a gaze so stern it should have withered her on the spot. She had watched the whole thing. She had waited for the conflict to peak before stepping out to play the savior. She didn't fear his anger. She stuck her tongue out at him before darting over to Lu Yu Tong. Big sister, you are so beautiful." The guards immediately melted away, offering hurried apologies. Ling Han was a guest. The invitation was a game they no longer wanted part of. Jin Wushang stood in the dust, his mind spinning with a venomous, distorted logic. He's a gigolo, he thought, his eyes burning with hate. He's clinging to the princess. He's living off women. He straightened his robes, a smug, delusional pride returning to his broken face. You think you've won? Jin Wushang sneered, stepping toward Ling Han. You want to make peace now? It's too late, I will see you. Pa. The slap echoed across the street like a gunshot. Jin Wushang's head snapped to the side. The silence that followed was absolute, heavy with the weight of an unpardonable sin. You do not slap a young master of the Jin clan. You do not humiliate a great clan in front of the king's guards. It was more than a fight. It was an execution of honor. Even the princes would think twice before such a public insult. Ling Han looked down at his hand, then back at the stunned, trembling boy. The next time you open your mouth, Ling Han whispered, his voice a low, terrifying promise of death, I won't use my palm. I'll use my blade. Now, get out of my sight. Qi Zhan Tai gasped, her hand over her mouth. The guards stood frozen. They realized in that moment that Ling Han wasn't just a genius. He was a madman who feared nothing, neither the Jin clan, nor the laws of men. Ling Han's philosophy was a jagged, simple line. Walk past him, and he was a shadow. Cross him, and he was the storm. You've clawed at me 3 times now, Ling Han said, his voice dropping into a low, vibrating register of cold fury. Did you truly believe I was a target that wouldn't bite back? Jin Wushang's face was a map of agony and disbelief. He wanted to howl, to weep, to scream at the sky. He was the victim here. He was the one thrown into walls and slapped like a disobedient cur. But under Ling Han's gaze, the logic of the great Jin clan withered into ash. You laugh now, Jin Wushang hissed through cracked lips, retreating toward his carriage. But when my brother, Jin Wuji, finds you, he will peel the arrogance from your bones. Pa. 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 The air exploded with the sound of 3 more slaps, delivered with such rhythmic, brutal precision that Jin Wushang's head snapped back and forth like a pendulum. Ling Han didn't even look at him as he wiped his palm on his robe. I'll be waiting, Ling Han whispered. He turned and strode into the residence, Lu Yu Tong and Qi Zhan Tai flanking him. The 7th princess let out a long, theatrical sigh, though her eyes were dancing with a chaotic light. You're a walking disaster, she muttered. That was a Jin. A parasite, sure, but his brother is a god in this city. I should send word to my master to prepare a coffin. Or at least a very good lawyer. I'm not dying for your temper. Ling Han reached out and rapped her sharply on the head. If you hadn't forgotten my invitation to watch the fireworks, princess, there wouldn't be a mess to clean. Your games have a price. Forgotten. It was an honest mistake, she squeaked, rubbing her head and hiding behind Lu Yu Tong. They entered the main hall. It was a sea of flickering candlelight and low, obsidian-topped tables. The hierarchy was etched into the floor. The closer to the front, the more lethal the guest. Most tables were packed with the elite of the surrounding territories, their eyes sharp and predatory. Qi Zhan Tai gestured vaguely toward the back, a crafty smirk playing on her lips. She wanted to see if Ling Han would tuck his tail and sit with the commoners or if he had the suicidal gall to claim the front. Ling Han didn't hesitate. He didn't even pause to look at the safe seats. He walked straight toward the first row, his boots thudding rhythmically against the polished wood. The hall fell into a jagged silence. 4 of the 5 front tables were occupied by the apex predators of the younger generation. The 5th was empty, reserved for the absent Jin Wuji. Ling Han pulled out the cushion and sat down with a cold, terrifying ease. Lu Yu Tong sat beside him, her icy aura settling over the front row like a frost. The 4 rulers already seated, Li Dongyu, Baili Teng Yun, Sha Zhang Guang, and Lu Yu, all turned. Some smiled with a mocking pity. Others stared with a dark, burning curiosity. Who is this fool? The silent air screamed. Who steals a seat from the Jin clan's finest? Then, the inner doors groaned open. Qi Yongyi, the 4th prince, strode out. He moved with a kingly weight, every step radiating a calculated, royal confidence. Apologies for the wait, he laughed, his voice filling the hall. Everyone rose in a wave of respect. Every guest, that is, except for Ling Han, who sat like a stone monument. Qi Yongyi's eyes swept the room, pausing on the unfamiliar face in the first row. His brow twitched. Then, his gaze shifted to the woman beside Ling Han. His heart nearly stopped. He was a student of the Huyan Academy. He knew exactly who Lu Yu Tong was. The crown jewel of the Lu clan. A woman who answered to almost no one. And here she was, sitting in a secondary position to an unknown youth. The shock was a physical weight, but the prince was a master of masks. He kept his smile broad, his voice steady. "Allow me to introduce our elite," Qi Yongyi began, pointing to the first table. "Li Dongyu, the pride of the Stonewolf sect. Almost at the gushing spring tier, I hear?" "Don't tease me, Prince," Li Dongyu rumbled, his voice like grinding stones. The introductions continued: the cold Baili Tang Yun, the rising star Sha Zhongguang, the powerhouse Lu Yu. Finally, the prince's gaze landed on Ling Han. The hall held its breath. The tension was a piano wire stretched to the breaking point. Qi Yongyi didn't finish the sentence. He simply stopped, his eyes locked onto Ling Han's, an expectant, dangerous smile on his face. He wanted the boy to speak. He wanted to know what kind of man had the audacity to sit in a dead man's seat and command a Lu clan daughter. Ling Han looked up, his expression unreadable, his aura a silent challenge to the entire room. "I am Ling Han." He stood. He spoke. He sat. A faint, razor-thin smile was the only ornament on his face. The name hung in the air like a dead weight. Ling Han? The guests exchanged frantic, whispered glances. There was no Ling clan among the 8 great houses of the imperial city. Was he some hidden heir from the distant border cities? Or was he something far more dangerous? Only Qi Yongyi, the 4th prince, felt a cold sweat prickle his spine. He knew the woman sitting at the boy's side. To have a daughter of the Lu clan, a high-born martial princess, serving as his shadow. What kind of monster was this Ling Han, truly? The prince, ever the diplomat, smoothed the tension with a practiced laugh, pulling the room back into his orbit. He was winning them over, one golden cup at a time, until the air outside the hall shattered. Announcing the arrival of the first prince. The laughter died in 100 throats. The rivalry between the first and 4th princes was a blood feud draped in silk. Qi Yongsheng, the first prince, strode into the hall. He was a mountain of a man, 30 years old, radiating a sturdy, veteran bearing. He smiled at his younger brother, but his eyes were as cold as a serpent's. "4th brother," the first prince boomed, stopping just short of an embrace. "You host a feast for the people, and I, your eldest brother, must come to offer my support." Qi Yongyi's smile was a porcelain mask. He knew exactly why his brother was here. To decapitate his momentum and humiliate his guests. "I appreciate the gesture, eldest brother," Qi Yongyi replied, his voice dripping with false warmth. "I didn't come alone," the first prince said, a predatory glint in his eye. "I brought a noble guest. Brother Guo, if you please." A young man in drab gray robes walked into the torchlight. He was unremarkable until the light hit the badge on his chest. Yellow grade, medium-level alchemist. The room gasped. In a world where martial artists lived and died by the pills they consumed, an alchemist was a god. But the first prince wasn't finished. "This is Guo Dingquan," he announced, his voice ringing with triumph. "And his master? The legendary Grandmaster Duanmu Changfeng. The man who excels in both the blade and the cauldron." The blow landed with brutal force. By bringing Guo, the first prince was signaling that he had the backing of a black-grade alchemist. It was a declaration of war. He was telling every genius in the room, "Support my brother and starve. Support me and transcend." Guo Dingquan didn't even acknowledge the 4th prince's greeting. He ignored the bows of the lesser men. His eyes swept the front row, landed on Lu Yu Tong's icy beauty, and his path became a straight, arrogant line. He stopped at Ling Han's table. "Get lost," Guo Dingquan spat. The words were a cold spray of filth. The hall went silent. This was a man with a black-grade master behind him. He didn't ask, he commanded. Ling Han didn't stand. He didn't even look up at first. He offered that same, terrifyingly faint smile. "Why don't you try saying that again?" "I said, get lost. Get lost. Get lost," Guo roared, leaning over the table, his face twisted in a sneer. Ling Han's hand was a blur. A strike so fast it seemed to teleport. He seized Guo Dingquan by the throat. With a savage, bone-jarring wrench. Pung! He slammed the alchemist's face into the mahogany table. The wine jar toppled, drenching Guo's head in crimson liquid that looked disturbingly like blood. "Wu!" Guo thrashed, his muffled screams bubbling through the spilled wine as Ling Han pinned him down with the weight of a mountain. The hall froze. It wasn't just a fight. It was sacrilege. To strike an alchemist was to invite a curse upon your entire lineage. "Release him," the first prince bellowed, his face turning a dark, thunderous red. He lunged forward, his hand a claw aimed at Ling Han's throat. "I command you." Shua. A wall of icy intent intercepted him. Lu Yutong stood her ground, her palm meeting the prince's charge, the shockwave of their collision rattling the nearby tables. The first prince recoiled, stunned by her strength and her ethereal beauty. Step down, girl. I do not wish to break you. Lu Yutong didn't blink. Her voice was a shard of ice shoved into the prince's heart. Get lost. The first prince, the heir to the throne, told to get lost by a woman in his brother's house. Qi Yongyi watched from the dais, a dark, satisfied grin spreading across his face. His brother had brought a god to the feast, but he had forgotten one thing. Ling Han didn't believe in gods. He only believed in the dust beneath his boots. The silence that followed was thick, suffocating, and smelled of spilled wine and old blood. Get lost. With a casual wave of his hand, Ling Han sent Guo Dingquan, a yellow-grade medium-level alchemist, sailing through the air like a sack of refuse. Pung. He hit the stone wall with a bone-crunching thud. Bastard. Guo Dingquan scrambled to his feet, his face a mask of purple fury. To an alchemist, dignity was more precious than life, and Ling Han had just ground his into the dirt. Wine dripped from his chin, soaking into his expensive robes. You want to try it again? Ling Han asked. His voice was a low, terrifying rumble. He had broken greater men than this in his past life. A mid-tier alchemist was nothing more than a loud-mouthed insect. I want you dead. Guo roared, charging back. Pung. The movement was too fast for the eye to follow. Ling Han's hand clamped onto Guo's neck once more. With a surge of raw, brutal power, he slammed the alchemist face first into the mahogany. The wood groaned and then shattered, the table splitting in half under the force of the impact. Ah! Guo's veins bulged as he thrashed, but the grip on his neck was like a vice of cold iron. He finally realized. The gap between them wasn't a crack, it was a canyon. Desperate and humiliated, he turned to the crowd, his voice cracking with rage. Whoever helps me thrash this brat, I will gift 10 embracing origin pills. No, an earth and fire pill. The hall erupted in a fever of greed. An earth and fire pill? It was the key to the gushing spring tear. A treasure that could save a martial artist 5 years of grueling cultivation. 100 pairs of eyes turned toward Ling Han, glowing with a predatory, lethal hunger. He was no longer a guest, he was a walking prize. What impudence! Qi Yongyi's voice cut through the madness. The fourth prince stood, his aura flaring to suppress the room. He knew the cost of an earth and fire pill, but he knew the value of Ling Han. And the woman beside him was higher. This is my residence. Anyone who draws a blade here answers to me. The fever broke. Rebellion was a heavy price for a pill. Guo Dingquan breathed heavily, his eyes spitting fire at the prince. He didn't say another word. He turned and stormed out of the hall, the first prince scurrying after him like a beaten dog. They weren't giving up. They were going to get the master. They were going to bring the wrath of a black-grade alchemist down on this house. Peace returned, but it was a jagged, artificial thing. Servants cleared the wreckage of the table. Food was served, steaming meats and rich broths. But the guests ate with one eye on Ling Han. Ha 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 ha, apologies, fourth prince. I've arrived late. The laughter boomed, vibrating the rafters. A tall young man strode in, his presence so heavy it felt like a physical weight on the chest. Jin Wuji. The third son of the Jin clan, a titan of the Huyang Academy. Behind him, Jin Wushang followed like a shivering rat, pointing a trembling finger at the first row. Elder brother. That's him, that's the one. Jin Wuji's eyes swept the room, pausing in genuine shock when they landed on Lu Yutong. Yi, younger sister disciple Lu, what are you doing here? The icy beauty offered nothing but a cold, dismissive nod. Jin Wuji didn't care. He had spent the last hour investigating this, Ling Han. A nobody from a speck on the map called Great Cloud Town. A minor character who had dared to slap his brother and steal his seat. The Lu clan would never back such a peasant. Whatever game she was playing, she wouldn't die for a stray dog. He stepped up to the front row, his shadow looming over Ling Han. His voice was a shard of ice. Brat. Get lost from my seat. A savage, razor-thin smile sliced across Ling Han's face. He didn't flinch. He didn't roar. He simply looked at Jin Wuji with eyes that seemed to weigh the man's very soul and find it lacking. Are you absolutely certain, Ling Han whispered, his voice a low, vibrating growl that chilled the air, that you want this seat? This was my seat from the beginning, you peasant, Jin Wuji spat, his aura flaring with a suffocating, arrogant heat. Fine. If you crave it that much, it's yours. Ling Han stood up with a chilling, candid grace. Pooh! Gasps of pure, unadulterated shock ripped through the hall. The guests stared, mouths agape. This was the man who had just slammed an alchemist's face into a table. This was the man who had defied the first prince. Now, faced with the raw power of the Jin clan's crown jewel, he was tucking his tail? It was pathetic. It was a total, spineless collapse. Even Lu Yutong felt her heart stumble. She knew Ling Han's pride was a mountain, unyielding and ancient. To see him step aside for a thug like Jin Wuji felt like a betrayal of his very essence. But then, Ling Han's hand snaked out, firm and warm, drawing her close to his side. The sudden, intimate contact sent a violent blush racing across her cheeks, shattering her icy mask. The men in the room watched with blood-red envy, their knuckles widening as they gripped their wine cups. They wanted to tear that arm from his body. Ling Han led her to a dusty, unremarkable table several rows back. As they sat, he leaned in, his breath hot against her ear. "Just wait," he murmured, a dark, melodic promise in his tone. "The show is about to begin." "What show?" she whispered back, her heart hammering against her ribs. "Don't forget," Ling Han chuckled, "that Guo something went to find his master. And I made sure you left with a very vivid memory of what happened at that specific table." Lu Yutong's eyes widened, a slow realization dawning. "You're using Jin Wuji as a shield?" "I asked him if he wanted the seat. He insisted." Ling Han leaned back, his eyes gleaming with a predatory light. "He's about to inherit a debt he didn't even know he owed." The hall settled into a tense, judgmental silence. The fourth prince, Qi Yongyi, cast a glance of pure disdain toward Ling Han. He had no use for cowards. He turned his back on the peasant from Grey Cloud Town and began his political posturing. But the piece was a lie. "Master, that's him, that's the dog." A roar of pure, jagged hatred erupted from the entrance. Wu Dingquan was back, his face still stained with wine, his finger trembling as he pointed toward the front row, toward the seat where Jin Wuji sat, preening in his stolen glory. The air in the hall suddenly shrieked. A blur of gray robes blasted past the tables with the speed of a falling star. It was an old man, a sword strapped to his back, radiating the terrifying, bone-crushing pressure of a master. Before Jin Wuji could even blink, a withered hand clamped onto the back of his neck like a dragon's claw. Pung! The impact was brutal. The table disintegrated into 1,000 splinters. Jin Wuji's face was driven deep into the wreckage, buried under heaps of shredded meat and shattered porcelain. Hot gravy and bitter wine splattered over his hair, his eyes, his gasping mouth. "Ha ha ha ha, arrogant, were you? Try being arrogant now," Wu Dingquan screamed, rushing forward to land a series of savage, humiliating kicks on Jin Wuji's backside. He was a man possessed, bending every ounce of his previous shame into the man he thought was his tormentor. "Stop! Why are you beating him?" Jin Wushang shrieked, his voice cracking in terror. His world had turned upside down. His invincible brother was being thrashed like a common street dog by a gray-robed ghost. Duanmu Changfeng didn't listen. He held the neck tight, his gushing spring tear aura suffocating the entire room. He didn't care who the boy was. He only knew his disciple had been shamed at this table. The realization hit the room like a lightning strike. The laughter started low, then erupted into a raucous, mocking thunder. The geniuses doubled over, tears streaming down their faces as they watched the mighty Jin Wuji suffer for a crime he hadn't committed. Guo Dingquan finally paused, his chest heaving. He grabbed Jin Wuji by the hair and yanked his head back to gloat. He froze. The face staring back at him was not the cold, handsome face of Ling Han. It was a mask of wine-soaked rage, eyes burning with a murderous promise. Who are you?" Guo stammered, his blood turning to ice. "Pooh!" Jin Wuji spat a mouthful of blood and bile directly into the alchemist's face. The humiliation was so absolute, so visceral, it felt like his heart was being shredded. "I don't care who you are," Jin Wuji roared, his voice a jagged, guttural scream of pure, unadulterated hatred. "I will burn your world to ashes for this, you will all pay." "This is not the man," Duanmu Changfeng roared, his voice a jagged blade of confusion and growing fury. He looked down at the broken, gravy-soaked wreck under his hand and then back at his disciple. "If this isn't him, why did you point at this chair the moment we entered?" "No, this isn't him." Wu Dingquan was drowning in a sea of humiliation and bewilderment. He glared at the bloody face of Jin Wuji and spat. "Where is he? Where is the rat who was sitting here?" Jin Wuji wasn't a fool. The realization hit him like a physical blow to the gut, more painful than the smashing of the table. He had been played. Ling Han had known these predators were coming. He had known they would strike the seat, not the man. and Jin Wuji had demanded to step right into the trap. Ling Han. Jin Wuji's roar was a guttural, primal scream that shook the rafters. Blood and soup sprayed from his lips as he struggled to stand. Get out here, I am going to peel the skin from your meat. The name Ling Han acted like a spark in a powder keg. Guanmu Changfeng's eyes narrowed into twin slits of murderous intent. He was a grandmaster, a man of the gushing spring tier, and he had just been tricked into beating a total stranger like a common thug. The loss of face was catastrophic. Every eye in the hall pivoted to the back. Ling Han sat perfectly upright. He wasn't cowering. He wasn't running. He held a cup of wine to his lips, sipping it with a calm that felt like an insult to everyone bleeding in the room. He swirled the liquid, his mind far away, comparing this fine vintage to the celestial nectars of his past life and finding it wanting. You played us, Jin Wushang shrieked, pointing a trembling finger. The realization had finally clawed its way into his thick skull. The hall erupted. Men clutched their stomachs, howling with laughter. The irony was too delicious. The invincible Jin brothers had been systematically dismantled by a boy who hadn't even stood up to fight.
You are indeed tired of living, Duan Changfeng hissed. His aura exploded, a cold, crushing pressure that made the wine in the cups ripple. He didn't care about the Jin clan. He didn't care about the fourth prince. He strode toward Ling Han, his hand hovering near the hilt of his sword.
Guo Dingquan followed like a jackal, a jagged, bloody smile on his face. Finally, he thought, the end. Lu Yutong surged to her feet, her icy blade half drawn, her body a shield for Ling Han. But a firm, warm hand pressed against her shoulder, gently moving her aside. Ling Han looked at the approaching storm and spoke. His voice was quiet, but it carried a weight that silenced the room. The four winds rise, clouds in the heavens thrown into disorder, the tiger and crane both appear, creating invincibility. Guanmu Changfeng froze mid-step. It was as if he had been turned to stone. His eyes bulged, his jaw slackened, and his entire body began to shake, not with rage, but with a terrifying, desperate shock. That was the verbal chant, the lost, secret mantra for the eighth move of the sweeping cloud sword arts. The old man's heart hammered against his ribs. This technique was his life's obsession, the reason he could stand above his peers. But his scroll was a ruin. He had the 7 moves, but the final 2 were ghosts he had chased for decades. And here, in the mouth of a boy, was the key to the heavens. Duanmu's voice was a ragged stutter. You know it? You know the rest? Naturally, Ling Han replied, leaning back with a bored expression. Will you teach me? The Grandmaster's pride vanished instantly. He looked at Ling Han with the pleading eyes of a beggar. Ling Han offered a cold, dangerous smile. That depends entirely on your performance. Anything, Duanmu shouted, his voice cracking. Pills, gold, my own life. Tell me what you want. The guests stared, their minds breaking. One moment, Duanmu was a reaper. The next, he was a servant. Ling Han lazily pointed a finger. First at the blood-stained Jin Wuji, then at the trembling Jin Wushang, and finally at the terrified Guo Dingquan. These 3, Ling Han said softly, they are unpleasant to my eyes. Understood. Duanmu Changfeng didn't hesitate for a heartbeat. He spun around, seized his own disciple by the scruff of the neck, and blurred back toward the front row. Pung, pung, pung. The sound of meat hitting floor filled the hall. Duanmu didn't hold back. He rained down a storm of kicks and punches, a gushing spring master ravaging 3 men who couldn't even scream before the next blow landed. He beat them with a frantic, desperate energy, as if every bruise he inflicted was a sacrifice to the god sitting at the back of the room. The Jin brothers were broken. They were beyond depressed. They were in a waking nightmare. They had been thrashed twice in 10 minutes by the same man, and the second time was because their victim had simply found them an eyesore. Qi Yongyi's face was twitching. He saw the shift in power. If Ling Han could command a black-grade alchemist like a dog, then the throne wasn't just a possibility, it was a certainty. It was into this chaos that Zhu Yixin and Zhang Wei Shan finally burst through the doors, ready for a bloodbath. They stopped dead, their jaws dropping. Duanmu Changfeng was foaming at the mouth, pummeling his own student and the Jin heirs into the floorboards, while Ling Han sat in the shadows, calmly peeling a piece of fruit. Old man Zhu, Ling Han called out, not even looking up. You're late. The appetizers are almost finished. The air in the arena was thick with the scent of sweat, ozone, and the simmering rage of 1,000 desperate warriors. For Guo Dingquan and the Jin brothers, the morning sun brought no warmth, only the cold, crushing weight of humiliation. Guo Dingquan was a hollow shell. To be thrashed by one's own master was a verdict from which there was no appeal. In the hierarchy of the world, a master's hand was the hand of fate. To strike back was to become a pariah, a traitor to the very soul of alchemy. He was trapped in a prison of his own master's making, and the key had been handed to Ling Han. The Jin brothers were no better. They were the scions of a great clan, yet they had been broken like common thieves. They knew the truth with a brutal clarity. Duanmu Changfeng was a titan who stood equal to the Da Yuan king himself. Their elders would not seek blood for this. They would likely bow and apologize for their son's clumsiness. Ling Han. The name was a rhythmic pulse of hatred in their veins. He was the ghost in the machine, the puppet master who had remained untouched while they were ground into the dirt. Young friend Ling, are you whole? Zhu Yishen and Zhang Weishan arrived, their voices trembling with an anxiety that bordered on reverence. I am fine, Ling Han said. His smile was thin, a blade of light in the dim morning. Fine? The witnesses felt a collective shiver. He hadn't just survived, he had conquered. He had bent a black-grade alchemist to his will with a few whispered words and turned the most powerful youths in the city into laughingstocks. The fourth prince, Qi Yongyi, watched Ling Han's retreating back, his heart hammering a frantic rhythm against his ribs. The calculus had changed. A single youth who commanded 3 black-grade alchemists was worth more than a dozen Lu clans. To possess Ling Han was to possess the throne. Ling Han did not linger. He returned to the Heaven's Medicine Pavilion, a grim shadow following him. Duanmu Changfeng, the sword and cauldron master, had discarded his dignity like a used rag. He craved the 8th move of the sweeping cloud sword arts with a hunger that surpassed hunger. Ling Han was a man of his word, but he was not a fool. He gave the old man the 8th move. The 9th? Never. Not until Ling Han stepped into the gushing spring tear himself. He needed a leash on this tiger, and the 9th move was a golden chain. Duanmu understood the silent contract. He bowed, took the chant, and vanished into the morning mist to cultivate. By dawn, the city was screaming with the news of the tournament, but Ling Han slept the deep, dreamless sleep of a conqueror. Even his father, Ling Dongsheng, remained oblivious to the tectonic shifts his son had caused in the night. But the peace was broken by a royal summons, the Da Yuan king. Ling Han entered the royal study alone. The king was a mountain of a man, 60 years old and radiating the suffocating pressure of the 6th layer of the spiritual ocean tier. To any other 17-year-old, this aura would be a physical weight, forcing them to their knees. Ling Han didn't even blink. He saw through the king's majesty to the stagnant truth. The man had been rotting at this level for a decade. Youngsters today. The king's voice was a low rumble, a mixture of amusement and wary respect. 17 years old. 4th layer of element gathering. 3 black-grade alchemists dancing to your tune. Even I have never tasted such power. I simply have a way with words, your majesty, Ling Han replied, his tone dangerously casual. The king laughed, a booming, hollow sound. He asked about the Lu clan girl, and Ling Han dodged with a joke. He asked which son should wear the crown, and Ling Han gave him an answer as slippery as oil on water. Then came the final move. I have a daughter, the king said, his eyes sharp. Become my son-in-law. It was a desperate play. The king saw the future in Ling Han and wanted to anchor it to his bloodline. My heart belongs to the blade and the cauldron, Ling Han said, waving the offer away as if it were a bothersome fly. Marriage is a cage I am not yet ready for. The king sighed, a sound of genuine regret. If the world turns against you, come to me. I give you my word. Ling Han accepted the favor. He knew he was weak. He knew the storm was coming. He returned to the pavilion to find the 4th prince waiting, desperate for a friendship that felt like a lifeline. They spoke as equals, a silent pact formed in the shadow of the coming war. Then, the sun rose on the day of the Da Yuan tournament. The arena was a sea of thousands. 50 seated participants stood like gods above the crowd. Ling Han took his place, his jade plaque heavy in his hand. He looked out over the 50 stages, knowing that by sunset, the weak would be harvested and only the predators would remain. Big Brother Ling, Li Hao and the others shouted from the sidelines, their voices lost in the roar of the crowd. Ling Han looked at the stage. The games were over. The blood was about to flow. The yellow sand of the wrestling ring didn't just look old, it looked stained. For centuries, it had drunk the blood of martyrs, criminals, and beasts. Today, it was thirsty for the blood of the young. I'm dead. I'm a walking corpse, Lu Dong whispered, his face ashen as he stared at the lot in his trembling hand. Group 7. The seed is Sima Wen Dong. 7th layer of element gathering. He doesn't just defeat people, he breaks them. Zhu Shuiyi's eyes were wide with a similar terror. I have the first group. I have to stand on the same sand as the fourth prince. There isn't a sliver of hope, not one.
Ling Han watched them, his expression a mask of cold, distant stone. He glanced at Li Hao. In 1 month, fueled by transcending origin pills and a desperate, driving hunger, Li Hao had clawed his way to the late third layer. With his saber chi, he wasn't a victim, he was a wolf hiding in the tall grass.
And you, big brother Ling? Chen Pengju asked, his voice thick with a mix of dread and awe. Which slaughterhouse did you draw? Ling Han didn't even look at the paper. Group 40. I am the seed. Pooh! The sound of collective choking filled the air. They stared at him as if he were a ghost returned from the void. A few months ago, he was a trash disciple in a backwater town. Now, he was a seeded elite. He was the target that 70 men would try to tear apart just to say they had touched a god. You. The fourth layer already? Li Hao punched Ling Han's chest, but his knuckles hit something that felt like reinforced iron. He has sword chi, Lu Dong muttered, his envy turning into a frantic sort of pride. He won't just win, he'll survive. But the air suddenly soured. A voice, sharp and poisonous as a rusted blade, cut through their conversation. Win? You think you're walking off that stage? Feng Luo. The coward who had tried to steal the dragon snake's fruit. The man Ling Han had beaten into the dirt like a mangy dog. He stood there, still a pathetic ninth-layer body refiner, but his eyes were burning with a loathsome, manic confidence. Big brother Ling is a seed, Zhu Shuiyi snapped. Where you? Dust. I am in group 40, Feng Luo hissed, a jagged smile splitting his face. Laugh now, peasants. By sunset, you'll be digging a hole for his remains. He turned and walked away, his laughter trailing behind him like a funeral shroud. Ignore the insect, Ling Han said. His voice was flat, devoid of emotion, yet it carried a brutal, underlying promise. The afternoon sun beat down like a hammer on an anvil. The first 3 rounds were a harvest of the weak. The fourth prince, Jin Wuji, Li Dongyu, the true monsters, didn't just win, they dominated. They moved through their groups like reapers through wheat, their ninth layer cultivation making the others look like children playing with sticks. Then came the fourth round. Hanner, Ling Dongxing gripped his son's shoulder. His hand was shaking. Go. Lu Yutong said nothing. She only nodded. She didn't fear for his life. She almost pitied the 70 men who were about to find out what happened when you caged a dragon. Ling Han stepped onto the stage. He was the first. The seed. He stood in the center, his black hair whipping in the wind, looking like a god of war carved from obsidian. 70 men scrambled up after him, their eyes predatory. Among them was Feng Luo. Begin, the gushing spring referee roared. Ha 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 ha. Kill him, clear the path, Feng Luo screamed. In an instant, the rules of honorable combat vanished. 30 men, mercenaries, cowards, and paid killers, drew their blades in a synchronized hiss of steel. They formed a wall of iron around Feng Luo, their eyes locked onto Ling Han with a singular, murderous intent. The crowd fell into a shocked, disgusted silence. It wasn't a tournament anymore, it was an execution, 30 against 1. Feng Luo stood behind his wall of meat and steel, his face contorted in a mask of hideous triumph. You hit me in the forest, Ling Han. You shamed me. Now, I'm going to watch them tear the meat from your bones while you beg for mercy. Ling Han didn't move. He didn't draw his sword. He only looked at the 30 men, his gaze as cold and indifferent as the void. Is that all? He whispered. The words were quiet, but they echoed in the sudden silence of the arena like a death knell. Despicable, this is an execution, not a tournament. Below the stage, Zhu Shuiyi's voice cracked with raw, helpless fury. The crowd was a sea of gnashing teeth and white knuckles. Feng Luo hadn't just brought a weapon, he had brought a small army. 30 men, 30 paid killers and cowards, had formed a jagged wall of steel around a boy who couldn't even reach the element-gathering tier. It was a mockery, a slaughterhouse disguised as a trial. Silence. The gushing spring referee's voice boomed like a crack of thunder, vibrating the very marrow in their bones. The rules do not forbid alliances. If you are weak enough to be ganged up on, then die. The arena fell into a sickened, heavy silence. 29 against 1, Lu Dong whispered, his face pale. And 14 of them are in the element-gathering tier. Ling Han is a seed, but he's only the 40th. He's just a 4th-layer kid. They're going to tear him apart. Not necessarily, Li Hao grunted, his hand white on the hilt of his saber. He has 4 flashes of sword chi. If he's going down, he's taking half of them to hell with him. On the stage, Feng Luo was a man possessed by a disgusting, manic triumph. "Ignore the trash," he shrieked at his mercenaries. "Throw the rest of these peasants off. Save the seed for last. I want to hear his bones snap when there's no one left to watch." The 30 mercenaries moved like a wave of iron. They didn't just fight. They bulldozed. One by one, the other participants were flung from the stage like broken dolls, leaving nothing but a vast, sandy expanse. Now, it was 22 against 1. Ling Han, Feng Luo crowed, stepping out from behind his wall of meat. "Look at you. All that pride, all that genius, and now you're just a dog backed into a corner. Kneel. Crawl to me and lick the dust off my boots, and maybe, I'll tell them not to cripple you for life." Ling Han stood in the center of the ring. He didn't draw his sword. He didn't even settle into a stance. He looked at Feng Luo with a gaze so cold, so utterly detached, it was as if he were looking at a piece of rotting fruit. "A clown like you," Ling Han whispered, his voice cutting through the wind like a razor, "has performed long enough. The audience is bored." "Kill him!" Feng Luo screamed, his face twisting into a mask of purple rage. "Break every limb, now." The 22 killers surged forward. The air hissed with the sound of 22 blades seeking blood. Ling Han moved. He didn't use a blade. He didn't use a shield. He became a blur of black cloth and lethal, explosive motion. Pung! 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 The dashing panther fists didn't just strike. They detonated. With the roar of the 5 elements origin nuclei behind every blow, Ling Han wasn't a 4th-layer martial artist. He was a hurricane. Every time his fist met flesh, a man was launched from the stage as if hit by a battering ram. Shields shattered, ribs snapped. In 10 seconds the stage was empty. Only Ling Han and Feng Luo remained. The silence that followed was absolute. The crowd stared, their breaths hitched in their throats. How? He was only in the 4th layer. But those strikes. That was the power of a late-stage element-gathering master. He hadn't just won, he had erased them. Feng Luo was shaking. His teeth were chattering so hard they sounded like stones in a jar. "No, it's not possible. The plan, my brother." "Your brother isn't here," Ling Han said, taking a slow, deliberate step forward. "Stop, I'm Feng Luo. My brother is the first-place champion. He's in the gushing spring tier. If you touch me, he will hunt you to the ends of the earth." Ling Han didn't answer with words. He blurred forward. A single, brutal kick caught Feng Luo in the gut. The sound of air leaving his lungs was a sickening whoosh. He was launched into the air, a pathetic, flailing shape that crashed into the dirt below the stage. "Group 40, the referee announced, his voice tinged with a new, grim respect. "Ling Han wins." "No," Feng Luo shrieked from the dirt, clutching his stomach, tears of rage and agony streaming down his face. "Change the verdict. Referee, you dog. Change it now or my brother will slaughter your entire family." The crowd erupted into derisive, jagged laughter. A body-refining worm threatening a gushing spring master. It was the height of pathetic delusion. "Get lost," the referee growled. He flicked his wrist, and a massive hand of golden origin power materialized in the air, snatched Feng Luo up like a piece of trash, and hurled him out of the stadium. The air in the wrestling ring was thick with more than just dust. It was heavy with the scent of old blood and the suffocating weight of social hierarchy. Origin power taking form. The mark of a gushing spring-tier warrior. The whisper rippled through the crowd like a cold wind. Feng Luo, the boy who had tried to buy his way to glory, was now a ghost, fleeing the arena amid a storm of mocking laughter. Had his brother, Feng Yan, not been a once-in-a-century monster, the referee would have likely crushed Feng Luo's skull right there on the sand for his insolence. In this world, the hierarchy was not just a suggestion, it was the law of the land. "Brother Ling, congratulations. A son in Huyang Academy, you must be dreaming. Dinner is on you tonight." Ling Dongxing. The clan heads of Grey Cloud Town swarmed Ling Dongxing. Their voices a mixture of genuine shock and calculated sycophancy. Ling Dongxing laughed, a booming, joyous sound that came from the very depths of his soul. He shook his head, wearing a mask of modesty that fooled no one. "Luck," he said, though his eyes were damp with pride. "The boy is just lucky. He won't go a step further, surely." But deep down, he knew. He saw the fire in his son's eyes. The kind of fire that doesn't just want a seat at the table, but wants to burn the table down. Ling Han stepped off the stage, navigating a sea of forced smiles and hollow praise. He knew these people. They were fair-weather friends, ready to cling to his robes if he rose and stomp on his fingers if he fell. He ignored them, retreating to the sanctuary of Heaven's medicine pavilion with his father and Lu Yu Tong. The next morning, the wrestling ring felt different. The fodder had been purged. Only the 50 predators remained. Li Hao stood beside Ling Han, his knuckles white as he stared at the giants of the generation, the fourth prince, Li Dongyu, Jin Wuji. I never thought I'd stand on the same ground as them, Li Hao whispered, his voice trembling with a raw, electric exhilaration. Don't look down on yourself, Ling Han growled, his voice a low, vibrating cord of steel. You have saber chi. Your path will outstrip theirs before the year is out. The chief butler stepped forward. He looked like a corpse in silk, his eyes narrowed to slits, but when he spoke, his voice was a physical blow that reached every corner of the stadium. The top 10 starts now. The rules were brutal in their simplicity. 10 stages. 10 masters. If you want the throne, you take it. You have one chance. By sundown, the last men standing are the kings of the tournament.
The fourth prince didn't wait. He moved like a golden bolt, claiming the first stage. Li Dongyu took the second. Jin Wuji, eyes still burning with the memory of his humiliation, claimed another. One by one, 7 of the most terrifying youths in the country staked their claims.
Ling Han didn't hesitate. He walked toward the 8th stage, his boots crunching on the blood-soaked sand. Big brother Ling, wait, Li Hao hissed. Let the others exhaust themselves. Wait until the sun starts to set. No, Ling Han said, his voice flat and devoid of fear. There isn't a man here who can make me sweat. He leapt. He landed. He waited. Stages 9 and 10 were quickly filled. The challenges began. Blades clashed, bones snapped, and screams echoed across the rain. But a strange, eerie silence settled around stage 8. The audience was baffled. There were 9th layer element gathering warriors in the crowd. Men who could crush a 4th layer kid like a grape. Why was no one moving? Why was the weakest stage master being ignored? The answer lay in the shadows of the elite. Those who had attended the fourth prince's banquet knew the truth. Ling Han wasn't just a boy. He was the center of a storm. 3 black-grade alchemists stood behind him. To challenge Ling Han was to spit in the face of the men who controlled the city's medicine. But ignorance is a dangerous thing. I challenge you. A young man, a dark horse from the outskirts who knew nothing of banquets or alchemists, leapt onto the stage. He saw a 4th layer opponent and a golden ticket to the top 10. He saw a victim. Ling Han didn't even draw his sword. He just looked at the boy, his eyes dark and bottomless. You've made a very loud mistake, Ling Han whispered. My name is Du Jun Ying, mark it well, for soon, this name will be the thunder that shakes the heavens. The young man roared, his chest heaving with a delusional, toxic pride. He was barely 20, a 6th layer element gathering warrior who moved as if the sun rose and set on his command. He had spent years rotting in the body refining tear until a fateful encounter. A hidden cache of pills and a manual had catapulted his cultivation skyward. Now, he looked at the world and saw only stepping stones. He saw Ling Han, a mere 4th layer seed, and he saw a victim. Ling Han didn't even settle into a combat stance. He looked at the boy with the weary eyes of an immortal watching a child play with a jagged shard of glass. I was getting bored, Ling Han murmured, his voice a low, dangerous vibration. I suppose I can play with you for a moment. Die. Du Jun Ying lunged. His saber cleared the scabbard in a hiss of silver light, cold as a winter tomb. It was a vicious, horizontal slash aimed at Ling Han's waist, merciless, fast, and heavy with the weight of his 6th layer origin power. Ding! The sound of steel on steel rang out, sharp enough to make the front row of the audience wince. Ling Han's sword had met the saber midair. With the flick of his wrist, Ling Han didn't just block, he guided. His blade screamed along the length of the saber, showering the sand in a rain of sparks, effortlessly bleeding away the momentum of the strike. The saber stopped 3 inches from Ling Han's ribs. It was dead in the air. You have a little skill, Du Jun Ying hissed, his face twisting. But against a destiny like mine, skill is a joke. I am a genius. You're the dirt I walk upon. He exploded into motion. Shua, shua, shua. The saber became a blur of silver arcs, striking with a ferocity that left the audience breathless. To them, it looked like Ling Han was being pushed back, barely clinging to life. Ling Han parried casually. He wasn't struggling. He was waiting for the sun to set. There was no rush to execute a clown. Ha 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 ha. Is that all? I've been holding back. Du Junying's laughter was a manic bark. Now, witness the power of a true ruler. His aura shifted. It became sharp, jagged, and terrifyingly focused. Shua. A flash of pale, lethal light extended from the tip of his blade. Saber chi! Someone screamed from the crowd. The stadium erupted. In this generation, fewer than 10 youths had managed to manifest chi, the mark of a true martial master. To see it here, on stage 8, was like seeing a miracle in the mud. You should feel honored, Du Junyin crowed, his eyes wide with madness. To die by my saber chi is the greatest gift you will ever receive. Ling Han sighed. It was a sound of profound, weary disappointment. You only have one flash of saber chi? Du Junyin froze. One was a miracle. One was a death sentence. It's enough to butcher you 100 times over, he screamed, swinging his blade in a massive, overhead arc. The saber chi tore through the air like a predatory dragon. Ling Han didn't dodge, he flicked his sword upward. Shua! A streak of lightning fast, brilliant light answered, sword chi. Pung! The collision was a physical shockwave. The saber chi didn't just meet the sword chi. It was shattered. It broke apart like glass against a hammer. Ling Han's sword chi didn't even slow down. It carved a path through the air and bit deep into Du Junying's chest. Blood sprayed across the yellow sand. Ah! Du Junying's scream was cut short as the sheer force of the chi launched him off the stage. He hit the ground in a heap of broken pride and torn flesh. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. The audience stared at the fourth layer, Seed, who had just obliterated a sixth layer master of chi with a single effortless strike. Even the fourth prince and Jin Wuji, standing on their own stages, felt a prickle of genuine alarm. This wasn't just chi. This was sword chi condensed to a terrifying, lethal purity. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the dust settled. The top 10 were decided. Li Hao had fought like a demon, but his low cultivation had finally betrayed him. He bowed out with honor, knowing his time would come. Ling Dongxing was swamped by the elite of the city, his face glowing with a joy so intense it looked like he might burst. His son, the trash of Great Cloud Town, was now one of the 10 strongest youths in the nation. But Ling Han wasn't looking at the crowd. He wasn't looking at the fourth prince. He was looking at the prize list for the final round. The dark moon grass. The key to his father's recovery. The reason he had bothered to stand on this stage at all. One more day, Ling Han whispered, his eyes narrowing as the final stars began to pierce the twilight. Tomorrow, I take it all. The night was a cold, suffocating shroud. But when the sun rose, it didn't bring warmth. It brought the scent of iron and the final, brutal reckoning of the Da Yuan tournament. This was the end. The slaughter to find the one true king. Can he do it? Can my son really take the crown? Ling Dongxing's voice was a ragged whisper, caught between a father's hope and a realist's terror. He had seen the monsters standing on those stages. He knew the gap between the fourth layer and the ninth was a mountain range of bone and blood.
Lu Yutong didn't even look at him. Her eyes were fixed on the black-clad figure of Ling Han. Don't insult him with your doubt, uncle, she said, her voice a low, vibrating chord of absolute certainty. If Ling Han says he will stand at the summit, then the world itself will bend to make it so.
The chief butler stepped forward, his face a withered mask of ancient authority. The top 10 rankings are set. Challenge those above you. Win, and you take their place. Lose, and you are cast down to defend your own patch of sand until the sun sets. The words had barely left his lips when the first explosion occurred. Fourth prince. I challenge you. Li Dongyu surged onto the first stage like a hunting leopard. 3 years of resentment and hidden cultivation boiled in his veins. He didn't just attack. He unleashed the little Tianyuan hands, his palms blurring into a storm of lethal strikes. Qi Yongyi laughed. It was the sound of a predator amused by a gnat. You stayed in this stagnant pond, Li Dongyu. I went to the imperial city. I tasted the pressure of true monsters. I learned what it means to be a son of heaven. Hong, 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 the air screamed. Qi Yongyi's fists weren't just meat and bone. They were encased in a shimmering, violent layer of fist qi. Every blow felt like a mountain collapsing. The son of heaven fist technique was a black-grade nightmare, and under its weight, Li Dongyu's defense didn't just crumble, it disintegrated. Pung! Li Dongyu was launched backward, blood spraying from his lips in a jagged arc. He hit the sand, his eyes wide with a bitter, soul-crushing realization. I am no match for you, he rasped, the words tasting like ash. 10 moves. The second strongest youth in the city hadn't even lasted 10 moves. There is no shame in falling to the emperor's technique, Qi Yongyi said, his voice dripping with a condescending grace that felt like a slap. The crowd was paralyzed. If this was the power of the first rank, who could possibly stand? But the bloodletting was only beginning. Jin Wuji, guidance is for the weak. I'm here for your seat. Bai Li Tang Yun roared from the fourth stage, leaping toward the third. Jin Wuji stood with his arms crossed, his eyes cold and bored. Then try to take it, little brother. Bai Li Tang Yun was a prodigy, 8th layer at 17. But against the Huyang Academy veteran, he looked like a child. Every strike he threw was swiped aside by Jin Wuji's single, casual hand. Is this the best the Bai Li sect can offer? Jin Wuji mocked. Pure garbage. Bai Li Tang Yun's face went purple with rage. He reached behind him and drew a black, obsidian staff. With a sharp flick, the weapon extended to 2 meters, humming with a dark, malevolent energy that made the sand at his feet dance. The staff of destruction, Jin Wuji whispered, his boredom finally replaced by a sharp, lethal focus. The weapon of a fallen master. Finally. Something worth killing. The air between them ignited. The stadium held its breath. They saw the giants clashing, the princes and the heirs trading blows that could level buildings. But at the edge of the arena, Ling Han was watching the prize table. He wasn't looking at the fourth prince. He wasn't looking at the legendary staff. He was looking at the dark moon grass. He took a step toward the stages. His aura began to leak out. Not like a flame, but like a cold, encroaching void. My turn, Ling Han whispered.